Sarasota Manatee editor Greer Ferguson, and thank you all for joining us for Open Book, the Business Observer's book club. And this afternoon we have some other folks from the Observer Media Group with us and the Business Observer. So please wave when I say your name, if you don't mind. We have Executive Editor Kat Hughes.
Hello, everyone.
Managing Editor Mark Gordon. Commercial Real Estate Editor Kevin McQuaid. Director of Marketing Robin Langton. And I can't see everyone on my screen. Who else have I missed? If I've missed you, feel free to give a shout out and wave. Okay, great. Well, thank you all for joining us again and for everyone's work to make this event possible. Books about leadership and business are important to many of us here today. And with this book club, we are exploring some of those books that we really love, the best books about leadership, the best books about business. And we're doing it through discussions with area leaders in business and community organizations. So today we're really excited to be discussing The Go-Giver, a little story about a powerful business idea. It was written by Bob Berg and John David Mann. And we're so glad that our discussion leader for this book club today is the one and only Heather Kasten, who I'll introduce a little shortly. And thank you to the members of her fan club that are here with us today. So one just quick housekeeping note, we are recording this event and it will be available to you later if you'd like to watch it again. And if you don't mind, I think we are all muted already, but if you're not muted yet, if you please mute yourself for now. And then once we get into the discussion portion of the book club, feel free to unmute yourself and chime in. And if your name doesn't on Zoom doesn't say your own name, if you would change that, rename yourself to your own name so we know who you are. You can do that by hovering over your face and clicking on the 3 dots in the upper right hand corner of your screen and selecting rename. Also, if you would please mark your calendars for our next virtual book club gathering, and that will be on Wednesday, April 7th from 4 to 5. And we hope you'll join us for all of our book clubs this year. So if you would also mark your calendar for June 2nd, September 1st, and November 3rd. And stay tuned for some more exciting announcements about what books we'll be discussing at those and who our discussion leaders will be. We want to, of course, thank our 3 generous sponsors for this book club event. Kirkring Barberio, Sarasota's premier CPA firm, providing a variety of tax, audit, and accounting services to businesses and individuals. Williams Parker, attorneys at law, committed to clients, service to community, and devotion to excellence in the practice of law, guiding principles for nearly 100 years. And Sarasota Chamber, a bridge that links businesses, organizations, and residents with innovative programs that strengthen Sarasota's economic vitality and quality of life. Thank you to all of our wonderful book club sponsors. And as I mentioned today, we're so lucky to have Heather Kasten with us leading our book club discussion. Heather is the CEO and president of the Sarasota Chamber. She's led the Chamber and other business support organizations for more than a decade. She's advocated locally, statewide, and on a national scale in support of small and large companies. So let's give a warm round of applause virtually for Heather. Heather, thanks again so much for being with us today and leading our discussion. I'll turn it over to you to share about what the Go-Giver means to you and start off our discussion. Thanks, Heather.
Oh, thank you so much, Greer, and really the entire Observer and Business Observer team. And as much as you guys are fans, it is absolutely reciprocated right back. Love working with so many of you. And I know I see Kathleen on the call, Mark, Kat. As many of you may or may not know, Emily Walsh is on our board of directors, and not next year, but the following year, she will also be chairman of the board. So I will officially be on the Observer team as well. I'll be reporting to Emily as our chairman. But really, I wanted to just start off today by thanking the Observer for this incredible opportunity. I also want to introduce and just thank Caitlin Bolton from our team, who is on the call. Caitlin, you want to give a wave? She is our communications coordinator. She does an amazing job here at the Chamber. She has a tough job keeping me in line, and I so appreciate all her help in the preparation, getting ready for today. So we'll go ahead and just jump right in. Caitlin, if you want to go ahead and pull up the slides. I do want to just mention that I hope today is like a true discussion. It's going to get real boring if you guys, listen to me the full hour. So I'm really looking forward to like a robust discussion with each of you. You can see the first slide, Greer teed it up. This is a book that really struck me, and I want to give credit to Craig Soretta with Premier Sotheby's. He recommended this book a while ago, and I picked it up and I literally ripped through it in about 2 hours. I found it so fascinating. I don't know about any of you, but I'm a huge fiction reader, and I loved how this story was written as a fable, as a story, written by two gentlemen. Both, one from the Christian faith, one from the Jewish faith, and those themes just echo throughout the entire book. So we can go to the next slide. That's me. We can keep going. So the book starts out, the main character, his name is Joe, and the book starts out, he's on deadline for a sales quota. I'm sure many of the Observer folks who are in sales and advertising can really relate to Joe. Anybody who's in a sales position, you get to that last week of the month, you're a ways from meeting the quota. We all feel that pressure and stress of trying to get things over the goal line. So he's on the verge of landing a big deal, and typical, ends up he's at the end of the month and the deal doesn't go through. He goes in to talk with someone who he considers a mentor, or maybe doesn't consider a mentor at the beginning, the character of Gus. And we'll hear more about Gus later in the story. But Gus ends up referring to him to someone by the name of Pinder and says, hey, this guy he's got a lot of clout, makes a lot of money. He's somebody that you might want to talk to. So we can go ahead and go to slide 4. And talking, this is just a little graphic of Pinder and Gus. We'll learn more about Gus. But long story short, Joe gets on the phone. He calls up Pinder, and surprise of all surprises, Pinder invites him over to his house the next morning. In fact, on a Saturday morning, to come and talk. So this is where we start getting into these 5 laws of stratospheric success. And as we go through them, I thought what we'd start off by doing is to do a polling question to see which of the 5 stratospheric laws of success resonated with you. So we'll cover all 5 of them today, and we won't have a whole lot of time, but the ones that you all find the most interesting, those are the ones we'll spend a little more time in and dive a little bit deeper into. So you'll see the poll on your screen. If you guys want to start selecting any of those 5 laws that you found to be, that you could resonate with or that you related to, we'll go ahead and spend some time on that.
Heather, it says they're sharing the poll. I don't know if I can vote on it though.
Okay.
Looks like we might be sharing previous results. Can we restart the poll?
Let's try. How's that? Better?
Perfect, thank you.
It doesn't show the poll sender, of course, what you guys are seeing, so thank you.
Okay, thank you guys. Gosh, we've got some that are really racking it up. Has everybody clicked on their thoughts? Okay, Wonderful. So it looks like, not, wouldn't say far and away, but a pretty significant lead is that fourth law, the law of authenticity. So we'll make sure to spend a little bit more time on that. And then also it looks like number 2 was the law of value, which is the first one. And we can go ahead and jump right into that. So Caitlin, if you want to pull up that first law. So this is the law of value. Talking about true worth is determined by how much more you give in value than you take in payment. And so we can go ahead and go back to the group. So this first law is where Pinder, who is this person that Joe's been referred to, he takes Joe the very first day to meet with someone by the name of Ernesto. Ernesto is the proprietor of one of the top restaurants in the city. And basically Joe learns that Ernesto started with a hot dog stand, and now fast forward, now he's got one of the top restaurants in the city. And so what Ernesto starts to share is that his thoughts is how he got to this point was that he always delivered more value than what he got payment for. Many of you guys have heard the saying, promise more than you deliver, and then deliver more than you promise. This is something that my parents, drilled into me from the time I was little. And so I had to kind of chuckle when I saw this first law of value, because it's something that was preached and preached and preached. It's something that I do need to continue to remind myself of. But is there anybody out there who wanted to share some thoughts or experience around that first, the law of value, and what that, what does that really mean? Anybody want to jump in? I will just say that I think, what Joe brought up when he initially heard it was, how do you make money at that, right? How do you make money if you're delivering more in value than what you're taking payment for? And I think as I thought about that law and how I could apply it to what we do here at the Chamber is, delivering value can come in many forms. It's how you treat people. It's the product that you have. It's doing the right thing, even when the right thing hurts. Whether you're a retailer and you're making a return when there was really nothing wrong with your product, whether it's just letting a customer vent and share their frustration. Even when you did all you could, sometimes just keeping your mouth shut and getting the feedback and listening. So I think it can come in many forms. When we start to do things in our companies, is there more that we could be delivering? Thinking about, are there ways that we could perpetually deliver more value? And it doesn't have to be in the terms of giving the store away, but what more can we be doing to serve our customers? I do want to just take a moment to make note that I think all of these laws apply not only in our businesses, but there were so many that you really resonated with my personal life. And whether it's your significant other or your marriage or a friendship that you have or the relationship you have with your kids, thinking about the value that you are returning to them. And I think you'll see that throughout. So it looks like Jim's got a question. Jim Tollerton.
Well, Heather, I was just going to observe that value has always been a very important word for me, because I think our whole economic system, for example, is premised on that value. We have the ability to choose, who we do business with and what we buy, or a product or service we spend our money or time on. And the beauty of course, the free enterprise economy is the breadth of options that we have and the choices. And so each single act of what we buy and choose to spend our value on, and of course, currency or money is a buildup of value, from our prior work. Well, it's stored in money or it's stored in currency. So it's theoretically an equal exchange of value. I think that, that pencil is worth $1.25, and so I'm willing to spend it, but I'm not willing to spend $1.50 whatever. So I think value is a powerful, powerful word. And interestingly enough, the other thought I had is that a couple of those other things, I didn't get a chance to study them, but the other options that we had really in a way were a reference to value also.
Really good point, Jim. Anyone else have any thoughts? Diane?
Listening to Jim Tollerton speak there, and I work with him on advertising, it reminds me of one particular approach to advertising that I think illustrates this. A lot of times in an ad, you may be just like selling your business, showing all the selling points. But if you take an ad, like Jim has done this in the past, and make it more of an article, and you educate the reader, you educate your potential customer, you're giving out information, that adds so much more value than just simply selling it's like the best way to market your business, by giving information, giving something to your potential customer.
Great point. So all of that is delivering more value than, someone's not just buying an ad. They're buying your recommendations, Diane. Yeah, they're buying your help and your assistance. Anybody else? Josh?
Yeah, I think when I look at this particular law or value and look at it from, it's a mindset that you approach everything with, and it's taking something from transactional to more of a relationship-based approach, and to do that, to approach this and looking to deliver more value than you receive, it creates it's like defaults you into an empathy. So you self-reflect, and you always asking yourself, what am I contributing to this relationship, and is this enough? Am I doing my part?
Mm-hmm.
So I would say empathy and relational versus transactional.
Excellent point. Kathleen, you look like you had your hand up. No, okay. Just scratching your ear. Well, as many of you know who read the book, Pinder challenged Joe with applying these laws daily. So he left that lunch with Ernesto and Pinder and got back to the office, and he didn't realize it at first, but he really was able to implement that law or take that law into action, whereby he learns that he's not going to get this big deal. The competitor is looking to choose someone else. He doesn't feel that Joe's firm is capable of handling the account. And so what does Joe do? Joe ends up referring this client to a competitor. And right then and there, again, delivering value to his client wasn't the outcome that Joe wanted. He wanted that big sale, but again, delivering value to the client by referring him to a firm that could handle the account. So then we move on. We'll spend a little time, Caitlin, if you want to tee up the second law, which is the law of compensation. So the next visitor that Pinder has Joe meet up with is Nicole. And Nicole is the owner of a software company. She used to be a teacher, a great teacher. And this law focuses on that your income is determined by how many people you serve and how well you serve them. So the example that was given with Nicole is that she had some great ways of teaching kids, and she was having an effect on 25 students in her classroom. And by creating this software, she could serve more kids, get her message across to more people, and basically enlarge the number of people that she was serving. Did anyone have any thoughts or ideas around this second law, the law of compensation? So when you think of, go ahead.
It's like a virtuous cycle. So, the more people you serve, or your income is determined by the more people you serve, well, you're not going to be able to serve a lot of people if you don't serve them well, because that determines your reputation, how well you serve them. Then the better you serve them, then there's going to be more people who would like your service. So I just see it as this law is a virtuous cycle kind of concept.
That's a great way to articulate that, Josh. Anyone else? Okay, let's go ahead and we will move on to the third law, the law of influence. Now, this day, when I do want to put a bullet on that law of compensation and how Joe, what does he do? He circles back to his office. He ends up delivering a cup of coffee to every single person on his floor. So, you know, I think when we hear the word compensation, we think of, you know, money coming back, but Joe was enlarging his sphere of influence by serving others, right? Going back and serving the entire team on his floor a cup of coffee. And I'm sure there were a lot of people who were like, what's up with Joe? We think about that, how you can be serving the people around you that you interact with every single day. I thought that was a really, really good example of that. So now going on to the third law, the law of influence. This is talking about how your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. I thought this was very interesting in that this third visitor that Joe gets introduced to is Sam, referred to as Sam, the insurance king. They take the elevator up to the 45th floor. This is clearly someone who has, quote unquote, arrived, top of the pyramid, and Joe and Pinder interact with Sam. And it goes through a lot of different things, but really what they hone in on is just Sam's magnetic personality, that people want to be around him, people want to be with him. And when you think about, people that you want to be around with and people that you want to do business with, those people, we could put them in the bucket of being magnetic as well. One thing that I thought was really interesting, how many of you have read the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? Just by a show of hands. Okay, so you know that one of the 7 habits is to think win-win, which is when you're doing business or you're interacting with someone that, both parties come out of it with a win. And during this third law, I thought it was really interesting that they kind of referenced this concept and really said that you really shouldn't think of it that way, because in essence, you're keeping score. So I do something for Kat, she now feels compelled to do something for me. And in the back of my mind, am I thinking, I did that for Kat, I think she owes me. So this whole idea of win-win is, keeping a scoreboard. And what Sam talked about during this third law was the law of really, of not keeping score like that, to just continue to give and to continue to serve. And that when you are a giver, that it basically makes you more of a magnetic person and a person that people want to be around and share their life with, whether that's work or home, personal, professional, that kind of thing. Any comments or thoughts on this third law, the law of influence? Mark?
Yeah, Heather, it's Mark Gordon with the Business Observer. And it's because I thought of it because I see Jim Tollerton on my screen. But it's actually, it's a kudos to his daughter, Taylor. My wife had some insurance issues, both personally and with her company, when she switched jobs. This is 9 years ago, and had a lot of trouble kind of navigating a system. And Taylor, through Jim's company, was super helpful. And it was one of these, exactly the situation that Josh Matlock talked about with relationship. Like, Taylor built a relationship with my wife, Elise, and she wasn't getting anything out of it at that time. She wasn't her rep or anything else. And that's become a really good relationship where they've connected and they're friends. But I think Taylor probably, if she was on the call, she probably would say she's probably gotten some work out of that. And that I thought of that when you put the law up on the screen, that's a classic win-win, because Taylor did it because she's a good person and she wanted to build that relationship.
Great. Laura?
Yeah, I think it's interesting when we talk about influence. I think a lot of people, when you use the word influence in your sphere of influence, you think of someone who's really outgoing and energetic, always the life of the party. I think it's always good to kind of take a step back and reflect on your own personality and what your own principles and values are, and not try to change yourself just to influence people. I think you need to be true to yourself, and at the end of the day, just do good in whatever you do. Work hard and put the customer first, put your colleague, your clients first. But I think in a lot of these kind of business books, it almost implies that everyone needs to be this extroverted person, where you really don't. I mean, you look at a lot of these leaders, and a lot of them are kind of weirdos. Like Elon Musk, I would say he's magnetic, but he's kind of a strange guy. So I always think that's good to keep in mind. You don't need to change yourself to expand your sphere of influence, in my opinion.
Great point, Laura. Anne Marie?
Sorry, it took me a moment to get off mute. Just going off of Laura's point, I actually agree with her completely. And the way that I look at that is to not enter into a situation, whether in this case, really from a business perspective, transactional or, that type of thing, but more relationship based. And I think back to a gentleman that I met in downtown LA, the most unassuming person you would ever meet, and yet was someone of great influence. And I was a very young junior banker at the time, and I learned a lot of important lessons. He was very patient, and we went on to have a very good, mutually beneficial business relationship. And fast forward, I don't know, a good 10, 12 years later, I was meeting with a company, and there was something about this business owner that kind of reminded me of this person. Now, mind you, these were in different locations. And, lo and behold, I was reviewing their financials, and I see in the payables that this company, which is owned by this person that I knew a dozen years ago, is one of their suppliers. And I mentioned to the business owner, "You really remind me of Mr. So-and-so." And he said, "He's my mentor." And as it turned out, he called that gentleman to get a reference on me, which it was one of the most satisfying moments. Yes, it worked out very well business-wise, but more on a personal basis that, I thought that I learned a lot from him, but he also felt that I added a lot to the relationship. And so just, giving more without expectation of return. And then when you do actually receive a return, it's much more meaningful to you as an individual. And you don't necessarily, as Laura said, you don't have to be the life of the party to accomplish that. So that's my little story on that.
Great story, Anne Marie. Thank you for sharing that. Diane, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, just tagging on to that, what makes a magnetic personality? I think everyone's kind of hitting on it, being giving and wanting to know about the person that you're talking to. A lot of us have been at luncheons where you sit next to someone and they talk a lot about themselves, on and on and on, and other people ask you a lot of questions. They do want to know about you genuinely. And I think those people are more magnetic because they are kind of giving and offering and wanting to learn about you and interacting instead of just talking about themselves. But I think that's what kind of makes a magnetic personality.
Yeah, a famous salesman's movie from, gosh, I'm probably dating myself 20 years ago, but good old Jerry Maguire. There is some serious life lessons in that movie. And the line, someone says, you're not selling anyone until you're selling everyone. And what does that mean? That means that, are you, being friendly to the custodian when you walk in your office building every day and somebody's there pushing the broom, and how are you treating that person? I heard a story, this was in my younger days, when I was with Eli Lilly Pharmaceuticals. I had a manager who told me that when they were interviewing somebody, they would literally take them to a restaurant and they would purposely tell the waiter, like, screw up their order. Like, just, if they, say I want the vegetarian burger, bring them the rare steak. And because they wanted to see, how does this person react? Do they get all snippy and quippy with the waiter or waitress, or are they humble? And do they show that person grace? And what does that look like? I've also heard stories of people watching people come in and interview for a job, things like, again, how they're treating the receptionist and having the receptionist kind of interview them before they even get back to the decision maker. And then the decision maker, talking to the receptionist saying, hey, how is this person? How did this person, treat you? And is this somebody that you'd like to work with? So I do think those are such key things. I know some of us may struggle with, not that we're not, that we're necessarily rude to people, but I know one thing I struggle with is I tend to be in my own little world, and I've got my head down and I'm busy and I'm thinking about 89 things, and I'm just, bulldozing my way through. And, how is that a reflection of me? What does that person think when I'm in my own little world on my phone, or hustling to my next meeting, or am I taking a moment to recognize and acknowledge the people, in our lives, the people who are invisible to a lot of people, and how are we making those people feel?
Heather, I will jump in there. That made me think of a book I read recently. A snippet that I still remember says, make every interaction the most important interaction. And that has stuck with me like for a very long time. Just getting to your point about, is it just a quick hi in the hallway? Or are you actually stopping and engaging and actually wondering how that person's day is? So it's just like taking the smallest moment and making it meaningful. Another thing that keeps coming to my mind in this conversation is I like to think that we chase the relationships versus the work. Work can go away at any point, but hopefully relationships are going to be longer lasting after that project is done, or if the project goes on hold. So I know we try very hard to chase relationships and not just a project or a budget number.
Great point, Amanda. I think you're spot on. Jim, you've got your hand raised.
Well, it's a couple thoughts come to mind. First of all, there seems to be a little bit of a religious component to this. The Judeo-Christian message of treat people the way you'd like to be treated, and the other observation I have is that in my experience, people don't change, frankly, and the way they treat you when you first meet them, or the way they're going to treat you in the end.
Great point. Yep. Amanda, you touched on something, being that we are the Chamber of Commerce, and not during COVID, but under normal circumstances, we are always having events and programs and things like that. And, when you are in that type of a setting, and, God willing, we'll all be back in those settings soon. I don't know if any of you struggle with, but my little mind is like a golden retriever. And when I'm in a room full of people, it's like I'm in a room full of tennis balls, and I'm like, oh, that's Sue and Joe and da 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 da. And it's been probably 10 years, but at one point I was at a function like that, and I was standing there talking to somebody, and they were so like all over the board. They were like trying to catch other people's attention, but they were talking. I was in front of them. And I just took a mental note. When you are standing across from someone, just hone in on their eyes, make them, just to reiterate what Amanda said, make them the most important thing. You're going to be able to circle over to the president in the room, or whoever it is that you've been dying to meet. You're going to get that opportunity, but just honor that person in front of you. And there are times, literally, and Kathleen, you touched on this, when people drone on and on, or I think Diane did. They're going on and on and on and on, but honor them, look them in the eye, and try not to be distracted. There's many times when I'm sitting there telling myself, like, do not look away. You are focused in on this person. So, Any other thoughts or comments on this law?
Some of these comments made me remember the part in the book where he talks about, I think Pindar was on a stage with Larry King and talked about how Larry mentioned that it's often the most famous people, the most successful people who are the nicest people. And I mean, I wonder if, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Are they successful because they're nice? Are they nice because they're successful? I think it's probably not a coincidence that definitely factors into their success, but that's definitely played out for me too as a reporter. It often seems like the people who are, that they have the biggest titles, the biggest companies, they're the most successful, and they are the nicest people, and they know how to make you feel like they're listening to you and paying attention to you, and like you said, how they're focusing in on you at that moment.
That's a great point, Greer. I know there is something beautiful about that spirit of humility. And when you meet someone who is, wicked successful like that, and they have and exude that spirit of humility, it is really something. It's magical. You know it when you see it. Kathleen, you raised your hand.
I did this time, and I love that you used wicked because the Boston girl is now talking, so I love that. To Greer's point, I just wanted to say, and I'm listening to kind of everybody's input on this, is that in sales or in relationships, when you go in as not your true, genuine self, it's exhausting because eventually you're kind of keeping up with almost a lie, and that never pans out. And one of the things we talk about a lot in sales training is to not go in and sell, to go in and have a conversation, to understand truly what a lot of these businesses need, what's important to them, what's going on in their world. Because until we understand that and truly understand where the connection is, it's going to eventually, the wheels are going to come off. So I think, to Jim's point about this having kind of a spiritual kind of base to it, it's just generally just being a genuinely good person and wanting the best for others. It comes back twofold. As my mother would say, because you quoted yours, Heather, what goes around comes around.
Very true.
Society functions better, frankly, when we do care about the other guy and we try not to get in their way and hurt them and help them. Just society functions better, not just the business world, but everything.
All great points. Yep, things do come full circle, don't they? So Kathleen, that's a perfect bridge and right into our fourth law, which was the one that the majority of you pinged on today, and that is the law of authenticity. So I wasn't real sure when I started, when I read this little caption, the most valuable gift you have to offer is yourself. I kind of scratched my head. I'm like, what does that really mean? But how this pertains back to our story and our main character, Joe, is that on day 4, Pindar takes Joe to a conference to hear Deborah Davenport, who at the time is the #1 real estate agent in the city. And she goes through and tells her story about, how it was her birthday and, she got a great gift from her friend, she got a great gift from her kids. And the third gift she got was her husband walking in saying that he's leaving. And she goes into real estate. She goes through, and I know we've got a lot of salespeople on the call today, but you guys know how many zillions of sales closings there are. And I kind of chuckled as I read the book, and she went through, just all the different techniques and the hard close, the this close, the that close. And after about a year, she was struggling, had no sales in real estate, was about to throw in the towel. Her very last possible ditch effort, she goes on this last call, and lo and behold, she doesn't even bring in her sales sheet, doesn't really employ any of these sales techniques that she's been taught. She just is simple, genuine, gets to know the lady, just talks from the heart, and lo and behold, she gets her first sale. So I did want to just read, we can go ahead and take this slide down. I did want to read just a portion that I thought was super meaningful. If you guys have your books with you, on page 87, she goes into Deborah says, what I'm here to sell you on is you. People remember this, no matter what your training, no matter what your skills, no matter what area you're in, you are your most important commodity. The most valuable gift you have to offer is you. Reaching any goal takes 10% specific knowledge or technical skills, 10% max. The other 90+% is people skills. I thought that was a powerful sentence that, you know, we can have all the technology, we can train, we can learn 89 closing techniques. But at the end of the day, your ability to relate to another person and the people skills that you bring to the table, that is what makes the difference. So she goes on to say, what's the foundation of people skills? Liking people, caring about people, being a good listener. Those are all helpful, but they're not the core of it. The core is who you are. It starts with you. So let's jump into, all of you guys pinged on this one. Anyone have any thoughts around this, the law of authenticity that you'd like to share?
I'll go first.
Sure. Stephen or Amanda?
Okay, go ahead, Stephen.
Sorry, thank you. Good evening, everyone. While I'm listening to the laws and to everybody's comments, Jim and Kathleen's especially just previous, and Greer touched upon it, the words, even the title, the 5 laws, the word success to me is interchangeable with just happiness, and also value with caring. But as I'm listening to the comments and getting to the law of authenticity, the word intentional caring is kind of jabbing me. I'm thinking about that because all the value in business, all these other things can be quantified. Do we give more value? What are the perceived value? But the caring is the intentional caring that you can't fake. Almost is, if you learned it when you were young and about the age of 12, you either have it or you don't, at least long term. And I have something to share on the next value that happened to me last evening, but the authenticity is you can only, just don't fake it. So I hope that gave something, but the word intentional caring stuck with the previous laws mentioned. Thank you.
Yep. Amanda, you want to jump in with your thoughts?
I got lots of background noise. I'll go quick. This one to me, as a younger professional, I feel like was almost like a call to action, a reminder, like, hey, you do bring value just by being yourself and your unique skill set, and almost like a battle cry. Don't be afraid to understand that value. So that was my thought.
Josh.
So, you know, looking at the law of authenticity and the notion of authenticity, I think, you know, there's the book out there by Malcolm Gladwell, Talking to Strangers. And, you know, the importance of, you know, society is built on the foundation of the default to trust. So we all default to trust. You have to trust other people or you can't do business, right? So there's a lot of trust out there. And the notion of being inauthentic, it's a violation of that trust. And so, you know, authenticity is a sort of super important one that once you kind of get away from that, it's really hitting at the core of this notion of trust and what it takes for our society to work.
You're spot on. Anybody else?
I think it's our battleground against the forefront of technology. I feel like for the probably past decade or so, we've all been told that our jobs are going to be replaced by machines. I mean, that just, it's not possibly true just because of this tenet that you yourself cannot be replicated. So bring what makes you whole yourself to the table every day. And I think at least then you're going to be able to kind of provide that value to your team, to your client. But yeah, I don't think all of our jobs are going to go away with technology. So I think this is the reason why.
Excellent point. Kathleen, you had your hand raised.
Okay. There must be some,
Can you hear me?
another Kathleen, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Being authentic requires courage. And I think where people go wrong with it is they feel compelled to please people, to try and anticipate what others are thinking of them or expecting of them. And you could drive yourself mad doing those kinds of things. You have to really understand that you are unique. You bring something unique to the table. It's your gift, and you share your gift. And if you stay true to that, you're not distracted by what you think others might be expecting of you.
Absolutely. Anyone else? Jim, you've got another thought?
Just a quick thing to follow up on Stephen's mention of the word success. I think of Earl Nightingale, many years ago, said he defined success as the continuing realization of a worthy ideal. And I thought that was pretty compelling. I've kind of carried that with me through the rest of my life.
Absolutely. All right, well, we'll go ahead and we'll move on to the fifth law of stratospheric success, and that is the law of receptivity. Basically, the key to effective giving is to stay open to receiving. Many of us have heard the saying, it's better to give than to receive. So this was another one of those that, kind of challenged my thinking. But as they gave the analogy about the inhale and the exhaling, yin and yang, there's a lot of different ways you can refer to that. And we can go back to the people screen. When you think about it, and when they put it, the exact words were, it's not better to give than to receive. It's just flat out arrogant. And I really had to I literally closed the book and sat that book down and had to kind of think about what did that mean? I think a lot of people, sometimes you hear of people like, oh, well, they've got leverage on you, or they, they've given, you owe them. Many of us have heard that saying. But this law, when I stopped to think about it, it really is a give and take, no matter what position you are in. That are you opening yourself up to, to not only give, but to receive. I think too that, we touched a little bit on it when we were talking about authenticity, but not being afraid. There are going to be people that take advantage of you. There just are. That there are people in this world, but not letting that change you or change your heart. And knowing that there are going to be times when those people, you cross paths and your lives intersect with those people, but to keep your compass true north of who you are and who you want to be, and that you are a giving person, and you are not going to let someone who does take advantage of you derail you from the person that you want to be. Any thoughts on this last law?
Heather, I had one.
Sure.
Just one thing that this law, I think, married really well for me with the other laws was just the idea of, we talked about people having unique gifts and different skills to offer, and, how we fit in as individuals with that. And this law kind of changed the paradigm for me in looking at accepting help and receiving as not a way that you're letting someone down and not being able to help them, or not, not being the way that you're falling short, but as an opportunity to honor someone else's gift and give them kind of a platform and a space to, show that to you and to give to you and really kind of shine in their own right.
You're absolutely right, Caitlin. Emily.
So this is going off of Caitlin too. So the reason why I was late is there's this big project looming over my head. And I mean, it's not big, it's just time consuming, right? And our CEO and my dad was brilliant and gave me advice. It was like, why don't you delegate? And I'm like, oh, that's brilliant. So delegating is almost that type of receiving help from others who are just as capable as you are to perform that duty. So this last one, I was just like, I get that one. So I think delegating is almost like that, saying, okay, I'm ready to receive. I'm receptive to you helping me. And I think that's probably a lot of people on this calls has struggled with delegating, because we're all, not all of us, but many of us are type A personalities and we can do everything ourselves and we don't need help. So I think that is something that I definitely struggle with. And so I think delegating is part of that receiving part.
Wow, I think you nailed it, Emily. Those who work with me, I struggle with those same things too. And when I do look in the mirror, it's pride. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to get it done quicker, faster, better. And that's prideful. Stephen, you said you had a story with this law.
Thank you so much. This is the worst one for me. The whole book, yeah, that makes sense. Oh, this is great. And I get here and I hit a wall and I go, it's obvious, especially with the inhale and exhale. You need to do this to be successful in business. We have to be receptive. I wasn't, and part of me is not. There was trouble in a previous lifetime moving. Oh, I can't move. It's so hard. Do you need any help? No. Just as previously mentioned, we don't take the help. I personally didn't. And sometimes people offer, can we give you, or here's this tip. Oh, no. And I think it's wrong. And I completely decline it. Last night, I performed a disinfecting. There was a COVID positive home and we do cleaning service. And I went and with all my supplies, and the gentleman after an hour and a half says, thank you so much. I saw you were greatly thorough. I'll go to Yelp or on Google and leave a review. And the first thing that I did was say, oh, no worries. It's just a pleasure to help. I get in the car and I'm going, what did I just do? Like, isn't that the whole point of either to get a check or to get a review at one point? And I just said, no, I declined the help where it would ultimately would have helped other people find me. And that was my story, that this is the one I have the most to learn from.
What a great story. That is so spot on. Anybody else? Jim?
You asking me?
Oh, I thought your hand was up. Sorry.
Well, the only thing I think about apropos of the comments is there's a passage in the Bible, pride goeth before the fall. And when we are prideful, it's a precursor to we're gonna hit a wall or a pitfall or something like that down the road of our own making.
That is true.
Yeah, I think we can always innovate. We can always change and be better. And even just having a different perspective, and even if that's not the route you ultimately take, at least you've kind of stepped away from the situation a little bit and you're able to receive that from someone else. But Heather, I think you brought up a really good point. Are all of these laws assuming that everyone is going to treat you as you're in the same way that you're treating others? And then how do you navigate when you're making these assumptions? But it's not so. There are people who are not good and are not genuine in the world. So I'd love to hear some people's thoughts about that too, about how you navigate those situations.
Kathleen?
It's funny, is it Laura that just said that? Because I wanted to make a comment about something that Amanda, I think it was, that said, and Josh said about Amanda learning to understand her worth and what she brought to the table. And what Joshua said about trust, because my response to that, Laura, would be is that in the years that I've learned in sales is that sometimes when they don't trust you in the beginning, they come across as angry and you tend to kind of feel like, oh, well, I've got to change my way of presenting. And what I've learned is that when you're genuine and standing your ground because it's of the best interest of the client, that usually pans out and trust comes through. So I feel like sometimes when people aren't being kind in the beginning, it is fear that is leading that a lot of times. And it's just up to us to maneuver through that.
Yeah, I'm sure many of you have heard the saying, hurt people hurt people. And it's hard to remember that when you're in the thick of a situation where you've been burned or, lied to or crossed, and, to remember those words. But usually it's that person that is, really the hurting person. In the essence of time, we were going to do another polling question, but let's keep going to the last slide, which is talking about full circle. So, at the end of this fifth law, Pender reveals that Joe himself is the connector. And we look at the full circle of the book of going back to Gus, who, remember at the beginning, we introduced Gus as somebody in the office that worked with Joe. Joe's the one who passed on the number to Pender. So Gus, who met Pender, introduced him to Sam, the insurance guru, who then introduced them to Ernesto, whose wife met Deborah, who's, Deborah sold, that was kind of her last effort to stay in real estate. She sells the house. So you see that just this whole way of thinking about things and how these laws, how these things all came full circle. And the book ends with, starting this coffee company, which we really didn't spend time today talking about. Another kind of character in the background, Rachel, who worked for Pender. She's trying to get a coffee company off the ground. And, the book ends with Joe being a part of, this coffee company and talking about, just things coming full circle. Any thoughts on this idea of full circle? Or we've also got just a couple of questions. And again, we want to honor your time today. We're so grateful that you would spend time with us. But any comments on the kind of the wrap up of the book and talking about things coming full circle? Or were there any questions that any of you had that you'd like to ask?
I can comment on the full circle part. This is something that one of my mentors, Jean Widener Goldstein, the founder of the Sarasota Ballet, taught me, but not until way later in my career, when I was in the role at the Observer, not at the ballet. But she told me, she goes, Emily, she's like, you've got to just let things be. They will all work out the way it's supposed to. And I know that's a cliche, but she said, my whole life and your whole life, Emily, you've always worked the plan, work the plan, work the plan. Sometimes that original plan is not the plan that ends up being the right plan in the end. So it's kind of allowing that full circle to evolve on its own and trusting that it will all fall into place.
I think that's a great point, Emily. It reminds me of a Garth Brooks song, Unanswered Prayers. Sometimes we hope and want things to go a certain way and they don't, but then we've come to find out years down the road, wow, now I know why that didn't happen. And I do think, we've talked a lot about pride today. I think sometimes when things aren't going our way or our lives aren't going down the path that maybe we thought they would go down, almost, just kind of surrendering and saying, okay, I don't understand this and this isn't what I thought, but I'm gonna trust that, God, you got this, and I'm gonna roll with it, and I'm gonna be accepting of it. Any other comments on full circle? One question that I did want to bring up before we wrap up our time here today is that are there any of these laws that, we talked a little bit about, after we get off this call today, like how are all of us on this call changed? How are we going to be different as we go back into our workplaces tomorrow, or when we get off and we come home to our boyfriend or our spouse or our kiddo? I mean, how many of us walk in the door and unload 10 hours of frustration on the kid because he didn't, dropped his muddy shoes on the front step? Any thoughts on that? How are any of you going to take this knowledge and, utilize it?
I think anytime you're just reminded to kind of revisit your principles and values, and I suppose what you live for every day, and whatever you're applying towards your business, you can apply towards your family life, as you mentioned, Heather. Just to be a good person, I think it's always a good reminder. take a moment, don't stress, and figure out what your value in life is.
And delegate.
Yeah. Got to remember that one.
Absolutely.
Anne Marie, did you have a comment you wanted to share?
I would say that because it was written as a fable, it's got a short, catchy name, and it has 5 laws, that it will be easier for people to remember and implement and stop and say, aha. But I almost would say that everyone that has commented that I've seen today, they probably have recognized themselves, either consciously or not, in some of those laws. And so at heart, they already carry some of those traits. So it's just a matter of, in our busy, crazy lives, breathing and remembering. And that's my thought. And I loved the book, and I thank you for introducing me to it.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, I will turn it back over to our host, Greer. And another thank you to the Observer Media Group, my family, my peeps there. So honored to this opportunity, and hope that each of you guys, hope we can all just take something from it. So Greer, back to you.
Well, thank you, Heather, so much. This was great. Let's do another virtual round of applause for Heather. Thank you for leading us in our discussion today. And thank you again to Caitlin Bolton for all of your help with today's event, and the entire team at the Chamber. Thank you to all of you. And thank you, of course, to all of you for joining us today. And we'd also like to invite you to check out the Business Observer website, which is businessobserverfl.com. Sign up for our daily headlines, emails, and subscribe to our print edition. And we hope to see you at our next book club on April 7th. So mark your calendars for that. And thanks again for joining us. And now let's all go out there and be go-givers.
Yeah.
Thank you.